One of my favorite places to go and read up on things happening up there. No, not up there. Although sometimes I think the people sitting in that particular house think they're up there. I just mean up there in Ottawa. Slight tangent there for you. But one of my favorite places to read all about that is Blacklocks. Blacklocks.ca, minding Ottawa's business, the only reporter-owned and operated newsroom covering our nation's capital. And every Wednesday morning, we check in with the managing editor there so we can understand better some of the stuff I've had the chance to read, and we can bring it to you here on the show thanks to Tom Korski, the managing editor at Blacklocks Reporter. Tom, good morning.
Good morning, Mike.
One of my articles that I got to read just this morning indicates to me, and I'm sure you'll be able to fill in the blanks, but the feds cannot handle all of the refugee claims they're currently experiencing, and now they need the help of the private sector, Tom?
Isn't that something? This is the National Immigration and Refugee Board appealing for consultants to help them clear their backlog. How bad can it be? It is so bad if you are a refugee claimant, legal immigrant, and you file your claim today, you can expect the board to come up with a ruling around the fall of 2030. Literally a 4-year backlog. By the way, those board rulings are then subject to appeal petitions to the federal court, which can take another 1 to 2 years. You are talking about a system that is now so dysfunctional. The chair of the board has described it as a shock in terms of volumes. Literally a 4-year backlog. It's through the roof there. It is spectacular.
And then you talk about the board and the appeals. I mean, this is 5 to 6 years going through the claims process while this person is essentially living in some sort of Canadian limbo.
Hands down, and at taxpayers' charge. Everyone knows this. By the way, the budget office has come as close as anybody, Mike, to saying how much is this costing the taxpayer. And they came up with a figure as high as $36,000. But that's just per individual, man, woman, and child. That's just for the appeals. That doesn't include shelter costs. That's a provincial charge. Or education costs for the kids. That's up to the local ratepayers. Or food bank use, or you name it. I mean, this is one of the most expensive foreign aid programs going. It's haphazard, the result of mismanagement. They won't say what the costs for individuals are. And for the longest time, it was out of control. The problem, Mike, is the Cabinet's now trying to restore, they've used the word control to take back control of the immigration system. But it's been such a fiasco for so long. These numbers are absolutely staggering. What are they up to now? Backlog increased 5-fold to 290,000 claims. That's today, and it grows every single day.
Okay, with all due respect intended to the dearly departed, and I mean that politically anyway, former federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh fought hard for pharmacare. That was part of the deal when the Liberals and the NDP got together in Parliament. But is that pharmacare deal dead, Tom? No duty on the part of the feds to negotiate here?
Dead, and how? The NDP to this day maintains that they somehow got some agreement from Cabinet that it must negotiate the pharmacare, the first steps towards mandatory public universal insurance for prescription drug costs. And they started off with diabetes medication and some contraception drugs. So far, they have, how many jurisdictions? Let's see, Manitoba, British Columbia, Prince Edward Island, and Yukon have signed up. So in other words, you're excluding, 85% of the population? And we see in a memo to the Minister of Health that says we actually, we have no obligation to negotiate anything with anybody. You know how sad this was for Jagmeet Singh. I always said what a fantasy it would have been to play cards with Jagmeet Singh, because he'd go to a poker party and announce, I just want to let you know, guys, I'm going to be folding every hand for the rest of the night. The feds had already reneged on the supply and confidence agreement he had before their disastrous 2025 election on pharmacare. They did not pass a bill that really mandates anything except to kind of talk about it. And if anyone was unclear on that, they put it in writing in this memo.
I loved, Tom, reading at blacklocks.ca about the federal government's promise to feed our kids in school. I remember when this promise was made, and I thought, of all of the things I expect of or want from my federal government, providing food in school for my child was not one of them. But nonetheless, here we go. How many kids are we feeding, Tom?
They don't know. Isn't that interesting? They announced this, this goes way back to Trudeau, and it was going to cost $200 million a year over 5 years, $1 billion. And they've said this over and over, that they are feeding 400,000 children. And it was clear, according to, for instance, testimony in parliamentary hearings by the Breakfast Club. It said, no. 200. This is arithmetic. $200 million a year, 400,000 children, 180 school days, that comes to $2.78 a day. You're not feeding any child for $2.78 a day unless you're giving them tap water and a box of chiclets. It's impossible. Average costs of these school lunch programs are typically $5 to $6 a day. It would take billions, testified Judith Berry, co-founder of the Breakfast Club. How do we know the feds know that they tried to pull a fast one? Because only now they're commissioning million-dollar research by the Institutes for Health to find out exactly what they're getting for their $1 billion. Isn't that something? Remember, and by the way, Matt Strauss was the MP who requested the original figures and got the disclosure in the House of Commons when they said, we didn't even ask how many kids were fed as a condition of the funding. The main thing was the slogan, though.
Matt Strauss is one of our guys right here in Cambridge, a Conservative MP. Glad he asked that question because this was a confusing one from the get-go, Tom. As I said, what business does the federal government have in the classrooms of the nation, if you'll forgive the phrase?
No, the provinces and territories were already doing it, and doing a pretty adequate job. Charities were already on the job, but you say that's fine. If it was the decision of Parliament and Cabinet to fund that, and the Prime Minister called it a game changer, then go ahead and do your homework. Or was it just a performative skit in front of the cameras with a teleprompter? I don't want to let you down, Mike. It looks that way because they threw money at the problem. The current Prime Minister has said they have to stop that. You're spending money without any interest in results. And every time you're called on the subject, housing, school food programs, immigration, they say, well, doggone it, look at all the money we spent. That's what they did.
That's what happens when we focus on process over outcomes. Okay, one more I just want to touch on before I let you go, and that is Correctional Services Canada, Tom. Our federal prison system is unsustainable?
Very expensive. Anyone who's looked at it has said so. And it's interesting. There haven't been any parliamentary hearings on this. I'd be surprised if that is not remedied quickly. Here is an access to information memo we see to the commissioner of the federal prison system, the Correctional Service. And they said, that, why don't I just read what the memo said? The current portfolio is not sustainable, quote, end of quote. They don't name which prisons they would close. But their problem is they have fixed costs over $3 billion a year. They have about 16,000 jail cells, about 14,000 inmates, about 11,000 guards. They have calculated, the correctional investigator, he's no friend of the Correctional Service, has calculated there are prisons, federal prisons in our country, where the number of guards outnumber the number of inmates. And what's the cost now? $436 a day. You find the war widow or the resident of the old soldier's home who gets a federal benefit of $436 a day. But prisoners do. That's an expensive system.
Indeed it is. As always, Tom, we appreciate you keeping your eyes and ears on these stories. We'll talk again in a week's time.
Thank you, Mike.
Tom Korski, managing editor, the Blacklocks Reporter. You can read it like I do at blacklocks.ca. Well worth the subscription. It's the only reporter-owned and operated newsroom covering our nation's capital, and it is just chock full of all kinds of things that make you go, I don't want to belabor the point, but I remember saying from the get-go, wouldn't it just make more sense when former Prime Minister Trudeau announced this school nutrition program? Look, we know that there are kids in need of these sorts of supports. I'm not knocking that by any stretch of the imagination. But what on earth does the federal government have to do with that? Why, if you realize that there are these gaps, don't you find ways to put money into the pockets of people who are having difficulty providing proper nutrition for their kids for the school day? What about that? You could target such a program. You could offer the tax relief. But I digress. What the hell do I know? I just sit here and share the news of the day with you. Tom Korski from Blacklock's Reporter joins us every Wednesday morning at 10, minding Ottawa's business. Check out Tom's work and his colleagues at blacklocks.ca.